Hi guys, welcome back to At Home with Holly. My name's Holly and I'm so glad that you're here with me today. So today we are going to be planting carrots, lettuce, and potatoes in the garden. So it is the first week of April. My estimated last frost date is the third week of April. Um, and I like to plant my potatoes about 3 to 4 weeks before my average last frost date. They are buried really deep in a raised bed. I don't do any hilling or anything. I bury them about 10 inches deep from the start. So they have plenty of time to grow up and poke out of the soil before the last frost date. And worst case scenario, the tips will get burned a little bit, but I like to get them a nice start. And normally I plant these in containers, and this year we are planting them in ground in the raised bed. So that's going to be fun. So I've got a couple other projects going on outside, so we're going to kind of like work around them, but I wanted to make sure we got these in. We've got some rain scheduled for the next 5 days in a row. And so that's the perfect time to have carrots and lettuce in the ground to germinate. So let's go ahead and grab our seeds and then let's get outside. I'm so glad that you're here with me today. So for our seeds this year, I am using up all of our old carrot seeds. I actually went through and all of them that were like 2022, 23, and 24. I just went ahead and grabbed them. These are all delicious. They're wonderful varieties. I'm just going to mix them up and plant them all. And they're old seeds, and carrots don't have great germination after the first year. So I'm going to seed these very heavily. These are actually going in the same beds that we grow our tomatoes in. They're going to go straight down the middle of the beds. I've got 2 beds these are going to go in. And then same thing with my lettuce seeds. I went ahead and grabbed all of the old seeds so that we could use them up. I'm going to sow them pretty heavily. And so these are 22, 23 seeds. And then if I use up all of these, then I do have a pack of pelleted seeds. But I'm going to be succession planting lettuce, so I might save those. They're pelleted, so they do need used up this year. But anyway, so we're going to take all 3 of these little bundles outside and see how far we get. I also have these 3 trays of tomatoes that we cut up. Actually, let me bring you back to when we cut these up so that they could kind of heal over so we could plant them out. So we have 3 different types of potatoes this year. We have the russet potatoes that we got from Azure Standard. We have Kennebec and we have Elba potatoes. And we actually made sure that they were in the basement in a cool, dark place so that they could chit for several weeks, which means makes the little sprouts grow. And then just about 2 days ago, I went down in the basement. I sliced them all up. And I went ahead and put them in these trays and let the fan on them so that they could dry and kind of heal over so that they had less of a chance of rotting once we got them in the ground. So normally I plant my potatoes in containers in grow bags. And the first year that I did that was super successful, had a really high yields. And I was like, this is how I'm going to do this forever. And then the next year, I did not have the greatest yield. We actually had mice that found our garden and ate right through the grow bags and ate all of our potatoes and our sweet potatoes. So it was such a bummer. Last year, we had hard-sided totes and I didn't water consistently. And so we did have a nice crop, but it wasn't like a high yield. And so this year I was like, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to dedicate one whole raised bed to these potatoes. So I'm going ahead and I'm making furrows about 10 inches deep. And I am layering in a whole bunch of fertilizer, Trifecta Plus, which is a organic slow release fertilizer from my gardener. I am loading it up with the fertilizer, and then I'm placing the potatoes sprout side up, cut side down into the furrows. Now I'm definitely spacing these closer together than is probably recommended. I'm doing that because number one, I really want potatoes this year. I want a lot of potatoes this year. I'm doing it for that reason, so that I'm planting a little extra basically, so that if the mice get in these raised beds, there's still some for me. If something happens, there's still some for me. So if you plant them close together, you may get smaller potatoes, and if you place them further apart, you may get larger potatoes. I'm going to amend the soil with fertilizer a couple times, hoping that if I feed them really well and I water them consistently, I'm actually going to put this bed on some drip irrigation, and I'm just better about making sure it gets consistent food and water. I'm hoping that it works out that I get large potatoes even though I'm placing them close together. So it's all just an experiment. We'll see how it goes. We learn and we get better every single year. So the first few little furrow rows that I was making, I was digging by hand, and I thought very quickly, why am I doing that? I have a shovel. So I went ahead and started using the shovel. So the first several rows are actually the russets that we got from Azure Standard, as long as they're organic potatoes that haven't been sprayed with sprout inhibitors. You can get them to chit inside, and so they will grow the sprouts. So we used the Azure Standard order that I placed had really large baked potatoes and like russet baked potato sized potatoes, and I thought, wow, these are great. So we actually did just keep some of those to the side and went ahead and had them chitting in the basement. And so the first few rows are those russets from Azure Standard. And then the next 2 rows after that are the Elba potatoes, which those are from Wood Prairie Farm. And I love using Wood Prairie Farm. They have so many fun varieties in there, and they ship at the right time, and they're just really good customer service. And I just really like that company. But so the Elbas are supposed to be a really good storage potato, and they're actually supposed to be the improved version of Kennebec. So we planted 2 rows of those, and then after those we planted Kennebec, and we got those from my local, my version of TSC, which is Family Farm and Home. So they sell those at all the Tractor Supply, the feed stores. So I went ahead and got a bag of Kennebec because they were cheap and they were here. And then I believe I also got a bag of russets that were much smaller than the Azure Standard ones. But I got an extra bag of those because I wanted to make sure that I had some extra, because my neighbor is growing a garden this year, and I wanted to make sure that we had some russet potatoes for them as well. So I took some of the Azure Standard ones that were really large and some of the ones from the feed store, and I have those still chitting in my basement to make sure that we have them for my next door neighbor. So as you can see, we just have a couple rows left, and so rinse and repeat here. So I'm just digging the furrow, I'm placing them cut side down, sprout side up in the hole, making sure that there's tons of Trifecta Plus, and then going ahead and raking it over to fill in the hole and moving on to the next row. Oh, and also the slicing of the potatoes. It's not necessary to slice the potatoes, but any more than 2 sprouts on the section of potato that you're planting is kind of unnecessary. So you either can take off the extra sprouts that you have growing, or you can slice them up into sections that are about the size of a chicken egg. That's what growers recommend. So that's what I did. I just made sure there was about 2 sprouts or eyes on each section, and they were about the size of a chicken egg. Okay, so we got this whole bed planted with our potatoes. We have our Kennebec, our Elba, and then we had our russets. So now we're gonna go down to those beds and get some carrots and lettuce in the ground. So although normally I am a no-dig, that's the style that I do, is I do no-dig gardening in my raised beds, and I just layer on compost every year. I did have to dig into these beds because I'm putting in a new tomato trellising system, and so I needed to set those 4x4 posts. So there is a little bit of like clay soil that came from the deep bottom of my bed that's kind of mixed in, and I'm just letting it get mixed in because that clay is just pulling up minerals and all that stuff from deep in the soil. So I'm not too worried about it, but I don't normally have chunks of the clay stuff sitting on top of the bed. But so it made the top of the soil a little bit uneven. So what I did was I went ahead and I grabbed a couple boards and used them to flatten out a section of soil that I wanted to be planting the carrots in, and I did that with both beds. And then what I did was I went ahead and sprinkled I pre-moistened the soil where it was going to go just to make sure it wasn't hydrophobic. And then I sprinkled 3 rows of carrots on each bed. And then I actually flipped those boards back over on top of the carrots. The carrot seeds are so small and they can bounce around and they can move and they can get eaten by birds and all the things that are trying to eat the food before it comes food. So what I usually do is I will leave boards on top of my carrot seeds, and after about a week I'll just kind of tip them up every once in a while, and when I see that there's a good bit of germination, then I will remove the boards. But until I see germination, I leave the boards on there. Number one, to protect the seeds from birds and stuff, and number two, to keep the moisture where it's supposed to go and not have the seeds bounce around from the raindrops and from being sprayed by the hoses and stuff. So I went ahead and got 3 rows of carrots in this bed, and then I will plant 3 rows of carrots in the other bed, and it ends up being the perfect amount to be able to use up all of our old seeds, and then also 1 pack of pelleted seeds that's actually for this year. So that worked out perfectly. All right, so I put all of the long carrots in this bed, and then I'll do all of the short ones in the next bed. Now for my lettuce seeds, I'm actually planting these in like the cut and come again style. So I just take a little row, I take my hand and make a little furrow, just like we do with the potatoes or the carrots. This one's really kind of a shallow one, and I go ahead and I sprinkle the seeds very heavily. Not normally this heavily, this is old seed, but I do really sprinkle this heavily, and I don't thin these out. These will actually grow up and naturally thin each other out, and then the 2 rows, they will actually hold each other up. They will grow into each other and hold each other up, and so I'm able to just come through and cut just about 3 or 4 inches above the soil, and have all this wonderful yummy leaf lettuce and romaine lettuce for my salads, and then it'll keep growing back and we can eat off this for several months. I will plant other successions in about I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks. I will plant another succession, and then I will do it again. As the other plants in the garden are growing up, these will actually be shaded spots, and so they'll last a little longer, but I still like to have a succession of lettuce growing. So in both of these beds, I'm actually going to be planting in this style of the cut and come again. So in this bed, I went ahead and I planted several varieties of like green leaf lettuce. And then in the next bed, I planted a half a row of the green leaf lettuce. And then I planted some red and green and also red romaine so that we have a nice variety for our salads for the next few months. Okay, so we have all of our potatoes planted in this 8x4 garden bed. These are our garlic beds. And then over here we have our first and second bed. And we planted 3 rows of carrots and then 2 rows of lettuce right in the front. We were able to get all of these packets used up. How great was that? I'm so glad that you guys are here with me today while we planted out our carrots and our lettuce and our potatoes. If you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. We have a whole lot more growing and building and chickens and fun projects and preserving to do. I want to thank you guys so much for all the likes and the comments and the shares. I can't wait to see you guys next time. Bye, my friend.